Cedric Coward could be the best wing available in the transfer portal. Does he fit in with KU? Is it a possibility for Bill Self and company?
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on? Derek Johnson here. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for making it your first listen every day. Thank you to everydayers catching each and every episode of the show. You can find us anywhere you get your podcasts, including on our YouTube page. Thank you if you already checked out our By Job Leaving KU football transfer portal episode from earlier as well. On today's edition of Locked On Jayhawks, we're breaking down Cedric Coward, having a deep dive into this possible Kansas Jayhawks basketball transfer portal target, who is one of the best players and wings in the portal. He's also in the draft prospect. What are KU's chances here? Those sort of things. And then we'll finish up with the latest news as well. KU baseball had a pretty awesome weekend, and Tyran Stokes, the number one recruit in the class of 2026, also visited Lawrence this past weekend as well. You can get tickets to all sorts of events like those things happening right in your neck of the woods here in Lawrence with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase with Game Time. Okay, let's start with Cedric Coward here. And Coward is a 6'6", 206-pound wing. He can play the 2, he can play the 3, he can play the 4. I think you like him best playing the 3 and 4. Who began his career at Willamette University, which is the Division III level, averaged 19 and 12 per game there. Transfers up to Eastern Washington, where he averages about 7 and 5 per game in his first year there, and then sticks around and breaks out year 2 at Eastern Washington, unanimous first-team All-Big Sky selection. He averages over 15 points, just under 7 rebounds per game, almost 2 stocks per game, steals plus blocks, on 57, 38, 90 shooting splits. And then he parlays that into going to Washington State. And, you know, to his credit, it wasn't even a situation where he's just like bouncing around, which I don't think anybody would blame him, going from D3 to Eastern Washington to Washington State to begin with. But he followed his head coach to Washington State. So showing some loyalty there with the same head coach for 3 straight years. And he had a really good first 6 games. He was putting up incredible numbers, which I'll get to here in a second. His final game before he gets injured, 22 points, and 9 rebounds, 7 assists. And then he has a bad season-ending shoulder injury in practice the day after that causes him to miss the rest of the season and take a medical red shirt. And so this is a guy who he will be, I don't know, with does the D3 year not count with medical redshirt? Would he be a redshirt junior? Would he be a redshirt senior? I'm not entirely sure there, but about 18 points per game in those 6 games at Washington State, 7 rebounds, 3.7 assists per game, 0.8 steals, 1.7 blocks, 56% from the floor, 40% from 3, 84% at the foul line. He's doing it from 3 and at the foul line on 5 or more attempts per game at both. So good volume there. A little over 65% effective field goal rate, which is incredible, especially for a wing. 70% true shooting percentage, which is bonkers, especially for a wing. The team was in those 6 games 13 points better with him on the floor offensively, and about 9 points better defensively with him on the floor. His previous season, which was a full season at Eastern Washington, it wasn't that elongated, but they were a lot better on the floor offensively and defensively as well to kind of back that up. And on Bart Torvik's site, a 5 transfer portal grade. So let's start here. Does Kansas have a shot? Well, there was a reported narrowing down of lists to like 5, which was Duke, Alabama, Florida, Kansas, and Washington. So on its own, they are in that specific list. There was some other stuff that kind of came out that said that, okay, some of these schools are the front runners here. And Kansas, I think on one of those was one of the 3. It was like Kansas, Alabama, and I can't remember the other one. Then there was another recent report that came out over the weekend. I think it was from On3 about that it seemed to be focusing in on these 2 schools. Alabama was one of them. Kansas was not. Okay, so do we take that all as like, okay, Kansas doesn't really have a shot here? I don't know. I don't really, because here's why. Even if there's this report that comes out and it's like, oh, the focus is on these 2 schools right now. Cedric Coward is in the NBA draft process right now. And what that means is it's entirely possibly, could commit to a school now and then does out the testing. It's also possible that he waits out the approach to see how it's going in the NBA draft process, right? That it could take a little bit more time. And to that notion, If you're Kansas and you have Tyran Stokes on campus this weekend, that is your number one priority. You play that out any way you can. And if Tyran Stokes decides that, he's not going to reclassify or he's going to go to another school or, whatever, then all of a sudden you have some of that money that you're able to come back to Cedric Coward and say, hey, listen, we want you become our primary target. But if Stokes wants to come to KU, then you just move on, right? And so to that notion, it's easy to be like, well, it's being focused on with these other two schools as opposed to Kansas. But if Stokes were to move on, then Kansas would probably put a bit of a harder full court press on him, and maybe that allows it to come into things, right? And as much as you might say, oh, well, this is the report right now. Okay, well, there were reports for weeks and weeks and weeks that Kevin McCullough didn't want to come back to school, or that he wasn't going to come back to school, that he was going to go off to the NBA, and then he ended up coming back for another year. So you never know with some of this stuff and how it's going to happen necessarily, I guess, point being. But anyway, the strengths of his game: efficiency offensively. 99th percentile last year in effective field goal percentage. And again, some of these stuff, you look at the stats last year, like, it could have just been a hot 6 games at the early part of the season, which is usually the easier part of the season. So I'm also going to bring up some numbers from the year before when he played a full season at Eastern Washington. He was in the 90th percentile in effective field goal percentage that year for his career. So taking all his years at the Division I level, 38.6% from three, 83.3% at the free throw line. That's a much bigger sample. The last 2 years are most impressive because the 3-point volume goes up. And in the 38 games he played between Eastern Washington and the 6 last year, he shot almost 39% on over 4 3-point attempts per game, which, like, out of comparison, Christian Braun, the title winning year, the year that got him into a first round draft pick, Christian Braun in 2022 shot 38.6% from 3. That's the same percentage as Coward over those last, 2 seasons of 38 games. But Braun did it on 3.3 attempts per game. Coward did it on 4.3. So, that shows how good of a shooter he is. By true shooting percentage, he had a 70 true shooting percentage, which I mentioned, and that is insane, even though it is only 6 games. If we take career numbers at the Division I level, that's 72 games, and his career true shooting percentage is 69.7. Udoka Azubuike. Udoka, I'm going to dunk everything in your face. Super efficient Azubuike had a career 68.6 true shooting percentage. That is insane, the efficiency. He also has a diverse offensive game. He can post it up a bit. 99th percentile in post-up points per possession. As a good up and under, working through on a pivot, spin, fade away, little hook shot. He can overpower smaller guards. He's also 87th percentile in catch and shoot. He can make threes with the defender closing out. He scores in the fast break. He is in the 95th percentile in points per possession as a ball handler. He shot almost 77% at the rim his last year, Eastern Washington. So again, that's bigger sample size, which was 91st percentile. He was in the 82nd percentile this past year in the limited sample at Wazoo. He was above the 90th percentile this year and the previous year at Eastern Washington in both in the paint, so that kind of floater range, and mid-range field goal percentage. He shot 33% on above the break threes at Eastern Washington, 37.5% on above the break threes at Wazoo. And he shot a combined 16 of 33, or 48%, on corner threes over his last 3 seasons of play. And then on deep threes, which CBB Analytics classifies as 25 or more foot threes, he was 17 of 48 from 3 over his last 3 seasons, which is a little over 35% from 3. Also 99th percentile in free throw percentage in 23 to 24, and 82nd percentile in free throw percentage this past season by his position. He did all of this with a 57th% usage rate last year at Wazoo in the 6 games he played. So I just listed a litany. Rewind this if you need to. Rewind this, undownload it, re-download it, rewind this, and go back and listen to that long list of things that I talked about where I was like, yeah, he scores in all this myriad of different ways. He also brings defensive activity, super high block numbers. The steal rate was 82nd percentile and 57th percentile in Eastern Washington in 2 years. It was only 20th percentile at Wazoo, but again, smaller sample was 6 games. The block rate was 64th percentile and 99th percentile, so the last 2 years respectively for his position. So total it up, 63rd Hakeem rate last year, 99th this past season. So let me rephrase that. 63rd percentile Hakeem rate his last year at Eastern Washington, 99th in the 6 games at Washington State. So how good of an overall defender is he? I don't know. Eastern Washington won 44 games in his 2 seasons there, but they were led more by the offense. The defense finished 210th and 262nd in KenPom. So is he that great of a defender? Is he more of just a steal and block defender, which still has its value? I don't entirely know, but like at least you're getting some defensive activity there. And I see a athletic, lengthy wing, and I'm like, yeah, there's no reason you can't be a good defender, right? Rebounding also brings that. In 6 games, he was 91st percentile in a rebound rate at Wazoo. He was 91st percentile in D rebound rate at Wazoo. If you go off the previous year, 75th percentile in D rebound rate and 32nd in O rebound rate at Eastern Washington. Passing, he was 73rd percentile in assist turnover rate. And then team impact. Like I said, the on and off numbers are really good, and it was almost 7 points better on offense, over 6 points better on defense if you just look at the bigger year, his full season at Eastern Washington. And this was from the Athletic, little excerpt there. He's a team player who will make the right pass and picks his spots wisely inside the offensive attack. He has long arms and he has the ability to play multiple positions. He'd be a great fit in just about any system because of his shooting and skills. So what are the questions here? How would he fit in with KU? Let's discuss that next. This episode of Locked On Jayhawks is brought to you by Supply House. Get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades, Supply House. Whether you're into plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400-plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast, from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free TradeMaster program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the TradeMaster program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, electrical supplies just with a few clicks. Plus use promo code S-H-5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com S-H-5. Don't forget to make Locked On College Basketball your second listen every day, or Locked On College Football as well. All right, continuing on, what are the biggest questions for Cedric Coward's game? Because there were a lot of positives that I was rolling through real quickly there. Then we'll get to the latest news with Tyran Stokes and KU baseball. Okay, so the big question here, I think number one has to be, what is the health level here, right? I mean, you're talking about a guy who just played 6 games. He had a bad season-ending shoulder injury that caused him to have surgery. Now, I don't think of like shoulder injuries the same way I do as like Achilles or, ACL injuries as much, where it's like, yeah, how is this going to impact you coming back? Are you going to have the same step and stuff? It's different. But still, the shoulder, obviously, it impacts you shooting the basketball, right? So is it going to be the same? Kind of coming off that, like that is a real question. And does it mean that he's more injury prone? Is it just one weird freak injury? Like how does that kind of all work out? Also, the other big question I have, how is he going to perform consistently against strong competition? He's had some good games against good opponents, but it hasn't been consistent. And he started his career at Division III. I don't know what the reasonings for that were. But obviously you're making big jumps year over year, right? And so in 9 career games against KenPom top 100 opponents, 63% on twos, which is still good for what it's worth, but it's also well below his career number, which is 71%. And here's the kicker. In those 9 games against KenPom top 100 opponents, only 4 of 25 from 3. That's 16%. Still, 9 games, small sample, especially over basically 2.5 seasons. What if we look at the 16 career games he's played against KenPom top 100 opponents, right? Then that's a little bit more games, still a small sample, but it's about half a season, right? 61% on twos, so about 10% lower than his career number, and only 10 of 42 on threes, 24%. So those aren't great. What about this? Again, the 2-point percentage is still good there. It's just lower than his season average. So in 2023 to 2024, which was his last season at Eastern Washington, he played 7 games that year in the non-con against Power 5 competition. Played Utah, Ole Miss, Cincinnati, Stanford, Washington State, USC, and Washington. He had 21 points against Stanford. So again, there were some games you can pull out. But if we total up the 7 to just average out, in those 7 games versus Power 5 opponents that year, he averaged 11.4 points, 5.3 rebounds, 1.6 assists, 0.1 blocks, 0.4 steals per game. Those are fine numbers, 11 and a half points, over 5 rebounds per game. Like, that's solid, right? But the idea here is you're wanting a star. And based on the overall numbers, you see a star. So when you see those numbers compared to it, you wonder, okay, does this guy go from being like a possible all-conference player to being just a good role player, And that's the question here, because the efficiency goes down. Those 7 games he played against Power 5 opponents at Eastern Washington that year, only 42.8% field goal, 24% from 3. So I don't know what to think here, right? Because you can also look at it and say all 7 of those Power 5 games came before Christmas of 2023. He's had a lot of time since then to get better, right? And you saw it, his first year from D3 up to Eastern Washington, he averaged 7 and 5. It took him a year to adjust. Then he had the great year the next year, right? Maybe it just took him some time to adjust. And maybe he was going to have that adjustment period at Washington State, but didn't get that chance. Are you going to have that afforded to you at Kansas? I don't know. At the same point in time, you look at kind of NBA draft circles, and this is a guy who, this was from Sam Vecini of The Athletic, who had him at number 44 in his latest top 100. And this was back in December, when the severity, I guess, of his injury wasn't maybe as known, or maybe other players hadn't, emerged as much. Vecini had him in his top 25 back in December. And here's a little blurb he had about him. Coward declared for the draft last year and impressed NBA teams in workouts, but returned to school and transferred to Washington State to play for his former coach at East Washington, David Riley. Coward is one of those guys who just does a little bit of everything at 6'6" with a 7-foot wingspan. He shoots it well, passes well, and defends at a solid level. So maybe this isn't some of the efficiency numbers in the stats would tell you this is a star. Maybe the struggles against better competition tells you that it's more of a role player. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. It's probably a star role player, if that kind of makes sense. Like, he will star as being a role player, and that can turn you into an NBA draft pick. Like, I think of like Andre Jackson that year at UConn, right? And I don't mean to compare their games. It's very different, but just in terms of what that can bring to the table. So what it add to the team? I think he'd be that kind of final piece that you're looking for, because he would add shooting. This team needs more shooting, right? He would add that level of shooting. He would add rebounding. You want more rebounding? Great. I also love the idea that he's really good posting up, and the idea that, okay, as good as I think Flory's going to be this season, it's not a known what you're going to get in terms of offensive post-ups from him. Well, you have a player here in Coward who can give you some of that post-up opportunity on offense. It also would give you another wing. It would make you more switchable. It would give you another player with a big wingspan. That's what you got with Flory. That's what you got with Peterson. I'd imagine that's what you have with Trey White. So that would be kind of exciting to add all of those things. What it wouldn't solve, I mean, I guess if he gets hurt, what's the wing depth, right? You'd be spending a lot of NIL money to make this. This would probably be your final big move. And then what wing depth would you have? You'd still need even more shooting if you're Kansas, right? Because even if you had shooting here, you still probably need more. And then what if he's not quite as good against better teams, right? What if he does end up being more of a role player and you paid him to come in and be a star because you had to pay him big bucks to keep him out of the NBA draft, and you could have used that, allocated that differently and used money on a good backup big or whatever some of these different things in. So those are some of the things that might not solve, but how they'd fit in the role and how he would fit on the team. I think if he did commit to KU, if that was a thing, I would expect the starting lineup to feature him and White as kind of your 3-4, where they can just kind of be interchangeable. I'd imagine offensively, Coward would be more of the 3 because he'd be the better shooter. But you would still, which honestly could work out, because then if you had a guard on him who was a 3, you would just post him up on him, and that would be great for KU offensively. And then on the defensive end, like, it would just be kind of interchangeable with White and him. I guess he has a little better block numbers in the big wingspan. Maybe he's more of the 4 defensively and White's more of the 3 defensively. But I don't think it really matters so much on the defensive end, where you're mostly switching this stuff anyway. And then I think another beauty of this with the role is, I mean, obviously he's already on like NBA draft radars, to where, like, I think the expectation would be if he does stay another year in college, okay, he's going to go pro after that. But you never know how this stuff works. And the idea that, okay, if the D3 year doesn't count and his last year at Washington State ends up being a medical redshirt, that means he technically would have 2 years left of NCAA play. And that's enticing too, under the idea that you could possibly get a kid who, yeah, what if it does take him time to adjust against better competition and he just ends up being like a good role player, which, to be clear, having another good role player around Darren Peterson and Floyd Badunga who does some things that your team needs would still be very helpful. and then you could be back for another year and kind of have that really special season if you needed him to. So that's another kind of added piece to the puzzle that you would kind of get with this year. But again, it doesn't sound like KU's in the top two at this moment in time, even though I do think that, yeah, if the Stokes news doesn't go their way, that gives you a pretty big pile of money. You could probably assume that you could be like, hey, I know we're not in your top two right now, but what do you think about this check? Now are we in your top two? And it's like, okay, maybe, right? Okay, some of the latest news. I just mentioned Tyran Stokes. Let's talk more about him. And KU baseball had quite the weekend, sweeping K-State. This episode of Locked On Jayhawks is brought to you by Game Time, and you might be looking for tickets right now to Royals games. You might be out of town or in the area. I don't know. For all I know, like if you're an everydayer, you're listening to this, this is keeping you, to your former college days at KU, but you live out of state, and maybe you want to go to a playoff hockey game or a playoff NBA game, right? And those are great environments to go to. Well, with Game Time, it makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets, even when demand is sky high. Prices on the app actually go down as tip-off gets closer, and their last-minute deals can save you up to 60%. With Game Time, they have last-minute deals to save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. So it's not just the sports, too. And they have all-in pricing. Click that little toggle. Get the all-in pricing. It means no surprise fees at checkout. What you see is what you pay. Take the guesswork out of buying with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Thank you for joining us here on Locked On Jayhawks, and don't forget to make Locked On College Basketball your second listen every day. So Tyran Stokes was just on campus in Lawrence visiting KU, the number one prospect in the class of 2026. And is it going to be something where he's willing to reclassify? Is it going to be something where Kansas is going to have an opportunity to bring in back-to-back number one recruits? I don't know. Is Kansas in good position? Is he going to pick another school? Right. There are a lot of questions that still come out of this, obviously. But again, the alarm bells were raised when he decided not to play AAU basketball. And so even if it's a difficult thing to get this all to work and to get him to reclassify, there are certain things where it's like, okay, well, why is this? That there hasn't been an answer to, right? So I don't know. We'll see where this kind of goes here. But obviously Kansas having a visit, like I'd imagine he had a good time. I'd imagine because a lot of kids have a good time when they come visit Kansas, right? So we'll see where this goes, but it'll be pretty big news, regardless of what happens. And who knows, because last off season, if you remember around this same point in time, might have been April, might have been May. I don't remember exactly, but like it might have been June. Darius Acuff Jr., who was the one of the other 5-star point guards in the class. He'll be going to Arkansas this next season. He visited Kansas too, and I remember there being some smoke like, oh, could he reclassify, right? And then it ended up he didn't reclassify, and he ended up picking Arkansas anyway. And that, we don't need to reopen that recruitment necessarily. I'm just bringing that one up to be like, it feels like there's like one guy every offseason that we hype up, this future 5-star prospect that might be visited, and it's like, oh, but could he reclassify? And it doesn't always work that way, right? But it seems like there might be a little smoke with it. I don't know. We'll see with Tyran Stokes. It'd certainly be interesting. How about KU baseball too, by the way? Swept Kansas State over the weekend, and I think they were down 3-1 in all 3 games at one point. But they ended up coming back and winning 5-3 on Friday night, 6-3 in the first of the doubleheader Saturday, and then 6-5 in the second doubleheader. What a catch by Derek Serta to finish things off out of center field, sliding to preserve the win in that third game. And it's not just the importance of sweeping your rival, it's the importance of what that means for the Big 12 standings, because K-State came into the week, I think, third in the Big 12, and Kansas was a few spots behind after getting swept by TCU. Now you get 3 back against a good opponent. You move to 12-6 in the conference, and now you have at Utah, which will be very interesting. I mean, I'm sure the Kansas hitters are going to love playing at altitude. You have the Cincinnati series, and then you're at home against BYU and at West Virginia. That's all you have left for the Big 12 season. Now, some important non-con games in the middle too. You're versus Missouri, you're at Nebraska this upcoming Tuesday. But this has been an unbelievable season. It just keeps continuing. 31-10, 12-6 in conference play. Just feels like with every win you rack up, you're getting closer and closer to securing that bid in the NCAA tournament. But like, that shouldn't be the limit for this team. It shouldn't just be the NCAA tournament, because the way they are playing, they can do some serious damage if they get there, as long as they keep playing like this. And certainly been fun to watch, and the multitude of ways they can do it, the way they can get to other teams' bullpens late in games, the way that their hitting never goes away, the way that, you know, they're able to come back from deficits. And you see moments of like brilliant starting pitching, like Friday night against K-State too. It was really cool to watch, and Dan Fitzgerald continues to work wonders this year and as a program leader for KU baseball. All right, that'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcasts, including on our YouTube page. Don't forget to check out our By Job transferring bonus episode as well. And see you next time with Locked On Jayhawks.